Let's build a better world for investing.
Let's lead in improving the quality and standards of the financial profession.
Keep your abreast of financial innovations here and abroad.
Be known for our integrity and professional excellence.
Let's always put investors' needs above our own.
Push for financial literacy.
Provide service to the investors through the selection of the best managed funds of the year. Let's build trust in our industry.
Advocate on behalf of industry issues.
Convince trust and asset management companies to adopt the Asset Managers Code and the Global Investment Performance Standards.
Let's put ethics at the heart of everything we do.
Talk about ethical decision-making.
Encourage ethical behavior and be really passionate about it.
Let's create an environment where investors' interests can grow.
Markets function at their best and economies grow.
For the ultimate benefit of the Philippine society.
I am Chris Arceo.
Mark Yu.
Erwin Ocampo Avante.
Rob Ramos.
Sandra Aralio Gonzalez.
Mark Ilaw.
Kate Burgos and I am CFA Charter.
We measure
up. Join us.
Let's measure up.
CFA Institute is a global association of investment professionals that sets the standard for excellence in the industry. Since its foundation in 1947, CFA Institute has aggregated about 100,000 members and candidates in the fastest growing region, Asia Pacific. In response to extensive demands, CFA Institute has created the Asia Pacific Research Exchange, or ARX, an online research platform focused on investment management. Covering 18 major markets in the region, ARX provides content on over 20 investment subjects, including within the fields of knowledge application, academics and regulation. Leveraging the extensive membership network and industry resources of CFA Institute, ARX is a sharing platform, feeding its users a great deal of first-hand industry news. ARX is also a learning platform, as a large number of high-quality research papers enable its users to stay abreast of all popular investment topics in the region. Beyond all that, ARX users can hear each other and find industry peers by publishing articles and research reports, making it a highly interactive platform. For more details, please visit www.arx.cfa. ARX is your preferred financial research platform for sharing, learning and interacting.
Hey, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Investor Series Crypto and NFTs webinar. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Nicolina Costa, CFA Charter Holder and Investment Officer of the Asian Development Bank, and I am your host for today's online event. So before we start, we would like to take this opportunity to recognize our annual corporate sponsors for the event. Our platinum sponsor is Sea Oil Philippines Incorporated, and our silver sponsors are BDO Capital, Coco Life Asset Management Company Incorporated, and FTI Consulting Philippines Incorporated. And our bronze sponsors are AP Securities Incorporated, DBP Daiwa Capital Markets Philippines Incorporated, and Papa Securities Corporation. Our event sponsors are, event partners are FMAP, Mart, and Share Philippines. So to formally welcome us all before the talk starts, may we please have the President and Chairman of the CFA Society Philippines Incorporated, Dr. Robert Ramos, CFA, Kaya, and CIPM. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Ms. Acosta. I usually open the lecture series by saying that I've always believed that even during the most trying times, every individual can find a lot of ways to improve. And obviously, as a promotion, obtaining the CFA charter is one path to this so-called improvement. And it just so happens that we have other programs as well, such as the CIPM and the ESG certificate. This continuous learning is a path to personal progress. So in this lecture series, I do hope that you pick up a lot of pointers on how you can traverse the road to self-improvement while scaling the corporate ladder. Thank you to our esteemed speaker, Mr. Gama, for sharing your time. And thank you all for attending this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Robert Ramos, for the warm welcome. Again, welcome to the webinar. This webinar is brought to you by the CFA Society Philippines. And joining us today to talk about the crypto and NFTs is the founder of Philippine Digital Asset Exchange, or PDAX. He has always had a passion for investing. He started his career as a management associate in HSBC, where he held various roles in treasury, retail banking, and wealth management. He then became vice president and headed the HSBC Trust Department. In 2017, he graduated from the Wharton School with an MBA, majoring in finance and real estate. He has since held roles in investment banking and M&A advisory. He is also a CFA charter holder and is an active member of the CFA Society of the Philippines. So without further ado, may we call on Mr. Nishal Gaba, CFA.
Thank you so much for that very warm introduction. It's a pleasure to be speaking to all of you this afternoon. Thank you for the warm welcome, Dr. Ramos. And yeah, as Nicolai mentioned, I'm also a CFA charter holder and have been in the crypto space for the past 6 years. And it's my pleasure to talk about a topic that I'm deeply passionate about. Maybe just a quick background on how I got into the space. Prior to starting PDAX, I was actually in the investment management space. So I was in the trust department of HSBC. And back then, being quite exposed to the financial markets, crypto was growing in popularity among traders. And that's because there were a lot of arbitrage opportunities across exchanges. And as I was pursuing my studies in business school, I discovered, along with my friends, a pretty big arbitrage opportunity that persisted in the crypto space for some time. And seeing that markets need to be efficient in order to be effective, we decided to start PDAX. But this afternoon's presentation is not going to be about PDAX. I love to cover various topics this afternoon, probably not in great depth because we probably don't have a lot of time, but I do want to cover at least an overview on blockchain technology, what it is, Please bear with me, as I know that this topic might seem basic to a lot of you here or already very familiar. We'll talk about the rise of crypto assets, the different kinds of crypto and blockchain available in the market today. What are the prevailing use cases with a particular focus on finance? And that's largely because of the venue that we're in, but also because globally today, financial markets are what's seeing most of the applications come to life. We'll touch on use cases in payments, securities, the proliferation of NFTs, covering a bit of DeFi and GameFi, and we'll also touch on some local regulatory developments. And allow me to just share some reminders before we begin. The views that will be expressed here are personal. They're not representative of PDAX's views. We'll also not be covering the present market conditions, just because they fluctuate on day to day, but we can probably talk about that during Q&A. We'll also not be endorsing any specific assets or projects, even though we might talk about them as examples. And last but not least, nothing here is investment advice. So a bit about blockchain technology. Blockchain technology was invented simultaneously as Bitcoin. Now, in a nutshell, what blockchain technology is just a type of ledger technology that allows applications to store information across a distributed network of ledgers, and it's that distribution that allows it to be secure, because in traditional technology, or what we might call Web 1 and Web 2, information is stored in centralized ledgers that are subject to hacks, or subject to risks, and are subject to the control of centralized intermediaries. But perhaps the best way to explain what best way to explain the key feature of blockchain technology is to talk about real examples. Since the advent of the internet, we have had the internet of information, right? Information was freely democratized. You can access pretty much every piece of knowledge in human history through a click of a button. But unfortunately, because of the way the internet is set up, we're unable to have a free exchange of goods or items of value. Case in point, if I were to email somebody a letter, essentially what's happening is I'm just uploading the information onto the internet, and the recipient downloads it from the internet. And so what happens is, when I send a letter to somebody, I'm not sending a letter, I'm just sending a copy, right? So while that's okay when we're exchanging information, it's not as okay when we're sending cash or other items of value. When we transfer 500 pesos to a friend through any of our banking apps today, it's very important that that amount leaves my wallet or leaves my control. And this is where the role of intermediaries in the financial services space came in, right? In order to send money from one person to another, we rely on banks. If we are banking at the same institution, it's more straightforward. A ledger entry could be made, debiting my account and crediting yours. But if in the absence of just one bank, and obviously we bank with multiple institutions, we rely on other centralized institutions to maintain, quote unquote, a master ledger of everything. Now, that has worked so far. but it also has its inefficiencies, right? I mentioned hacking risk, but I also but probably more important are the risks of the risks that arise from operational activities, right? Ledgers can become unreconciled, ledgers can be disputed, ledgers are subject to manipulation in some cases. So what is Bitcoin and how did Bitcoin change all of that? Well, Bitcoin is the world's first digital bearer instrument. So think about it as a cash that you can just pass from one person to another, and the value of that asset gets transferred without anybody standing in the middle. That's what Bitcoin is, but in digital form. So how does it work? Just like sending an email, right? Every Bitcoin wallet has a public key and a private key. Essentially, what would happen is you would use the private key to access the writing features of the blockchain, or to access the wallet and be able to send Bitcoin. When you send Bitcoin, what happens is that transaction gets broadcasted to the entire Bitcoin network, or what we might call the blockchain. And it's that broadcasting capability that makes this so secure. Because once a wallet is authenticated and a transaction is made using a private key, the Bitcoin network takes care of ensuring that all copies of the ledger on its network are kept identical, right? So if I send 1.2 BTC to someone else's wallet, all the copies of the Bitcoin ledger will update. Now, I'll point out that that's actually what is referred to as mining, right? If you volunteer your computing resources to support the Bitcoin network, you get rewarded with mining rewards, which in the case of Bitcoin is you'll be earning Bitcoin. Now, this is what you call a proof of work consensus mechanism, meaning if you're a Bitcoin miner, what you're essentially doing is your computer is solving mathematical puzzles to ensure that the transactions are authentic, and in exchange for expending computing power, you receive Bitcoin. With some other blockchains and networks, consensus is achieved differently, but we can cover maybe more of that during the Q&A. Now, since Bitcoin started, we've seen a meteoric rise in adoption. Now, Bitcoin in its earlier days was primarily used in very niche segments, right? People who wanted to transact outside the reach of government institutions. Obviously, a big part of that is illicit proceeds, but there's also very niche use cases where technologists and enthusiasts would just exchange crypto among themselves. But that obviously created a wave of adoption. And I think we saw that wave of adoption hit a peak in 2016, 2017, when Bitcoin became valuable enough that more institutional support or came about. What I mean by that is, before Bitcoin reached that price level, it was not economical for firms to support transacting on Bitcoin. But in 2014, 15, 16, we saw the rise of crypto exchanges. And as it happens, when you expand access to a particular asset, what tends to happen is previously, when there were no buyers, now there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands more buyers. And that, that translates to that demand, that translates to an expression of demand that gets built into the price. So it kind of led into this situation where the price of Bitcoin kept appreciating until it reached $20,000 in 2017. And it gave rise to a lot of new assets popping up. And I'll talk more about that later. Suffice it to say that there are so many crypto assets today. There are thousands of them. And most of them are unique in their own way. What are the common uses of crypto in the financial markets or in the financial services industry so far? The most obvious is as an alternative payment system, and I'll talk a bit about that shortly. Remittances and also tokenization of traditional assets. Now, altogether, these three sometimes are popularly known as decentralized finance or DeFi. But what we're learning now as an industry is that DeFi itself also has weaknesses, and we'll cover a bit of that later when we talk about actual real-world uses and developments in the regulatory framework. Now, as alternative payment systems, crypto assets have their strengths, right? They're generally open 24/7. Transfers are near instantaneous, minimal downtime, and you're not really dependent on any central authority facilitating the transaction. I think the largest or one of the largest transfers of Bitcoin, I think that was 160,000 BTC were transferred today. That would be about maybe $30 billion worth of Bitcoin. It was transferred almost instantaneously for under $1. Obviously, that was a long time ago, and the Bitcoin network is now seeing a lot more traffic. So it's not real time, but it's maybe it'll take about 10 minutes, but still much cheaper and more effective than having to go through the banking system. Now, obviously, there are trade-offs, right? There are systemic risks also in the crypto markets. With Bitcoin, I think we've seen less technology risk than in other crypto assets. But then again, there are also other crypto assets today that are more well suited to the payments use case than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is known to be slow, not as scalable. You would have maybe a Visa or MasterCard that can process 40 to 50,000 transactions per second, whereas that number is much lower in BTC. So aside from BTC, the other probably most important asset, crypto asset to come about is Ethereum, because Ethereum is not just a cryptocurrency, but rather Ethereum is a platform where you can actually build on top of the capabilities of blockchain technology. What I mean by that is, while in the Bitcoin network, all you can do is transfer Bitcoin and maintain a pristine accounting of who owns what Bitcoin. On Ethereum, you can create all sorts of applications, right? You can create payments that get triggered given certain conditions, right? So, for example, wallet A pays wallet B if it's raining today, right? So that's one example. You can create applications on Ethereum such that the payment is made when based on a certain criteria. The contract receives a positive trigger. Now, this application in Ethereum is what's generally known as smart contracts. Okay, you can also create a smart contract where upon receipt of, let's say, $100 worth of cryptocurrency, let's say it's a stable coin that's pegged to $1. Upon receipt of $100, it will pay $10 every year for 10 years and pay back $100 at the end of 10 years. Okay, so you can create smart contract bonds, for example. And there are a host of other applications, right? You can also create smart contracts to simulate let's say, a syndicated loan, right? Where a group of holders of these assets, if they are, of a minimum stake, have the right to vote on whether payments are released or not. So there's so many things that you can do here. But currently, suffice it to say that what we've seen rise from Ethereum's growth are issuances of tokens that can be used in pockets of networks, like, for example, games or metaverses, and I'll talk about those things later on too. Now, today, aside from Ethereum, there are also other smart contract platforms. All of them have their own pros and cons, right? So one thing I would mention here is Solana, right? Because it's one of the more popular application or popular platforms today for NFTs. Now, certainly it's less reliable than Ethereum because we've seen more downtime in something like Solana, but it's certainly much cheaper. There's also actually, it's not here because it's not as popular. Well, it's one of the most popular, but it's not really a decentralized ledger. It's Ripple, right? So the Ripple ledger actually can process a large number of transactions in a matter of seconds. It's highly centralized, but obviously that's the trade-off there is that it's subject to more centralized control. Okay, so I mentioned DeFi. One thing I would say about decentralized finance is that while a lot of wealth has been created in the DeFi space over the past couple of years, we also saw a lot of wealth destruction, right? And that's probably a feature of decentralized finance, that if you move centralized institutions, there are no central authorities that can bail out a payment system or a financial system, right? Without a central bank, obviously there's no lender of last resort, and there's also no authority that can unilaterally restore trust in the system. Okay, but that being said, DeFi does not have its merits, right? Today we live in a financial system that's very much intermediary dominated, which means that intermediaries command a lot of the bargaining power between users of the system. So if you were a lender, or if you have savings, you go to a bank. If you want to take out a loan, you go to a bank, right? So these central institutions perform their functions, I would say, quite efficiently, but there are still pockets of or segments of the market that remain unable to access these centralized structures, and that's where DeFi tends to come in. So probably what might happen, and again, this is now just a house view or a personal view, we would see more centralized versions of DeFi, right? Because at the end of the day, laws require that someone performs KYC if you're selling or distributing investment instruments. Most laws require some sort of risk profile assessment, suitability assessment, and so forth. So probably we will have something like a centralized, decentralized finance hybrid going forward. Now, remittances. So I'll try to breeze through this because this is probably the most obvious use case. But why is it that crypto being used in remittances has become very popular? I'll share with you a couple of interesting statistics. Annually, the Philippines probably receives between $32 to $35 billion from overseas workers. It might surprise many of us here to learn that as of this year in 2022, $3 billion worth of remittances would have come in the form of crypto, right? Would have been sent through crypto. Now that sounds staggering because I doubt that a lot of us here know people who receive crypto from their overseas Filipino worker relative. Um, but where that is happening is actually between institutions, right? So you have remittance companies, think of the large ones that are present here in the Philippines and globally, like MoneyGram or Western Union. That are migrating flows between certain currencies or remittance corridors from the FX markets into the crypto market. And well, I guess you might wonder, why are they doing this? They're doing this because using certain tokens offers them certain advantages, right? So in the case of the top two, let's say Ripple or Stellar, namely XRP and XLM tokens, they get the benefit of near real-time transfers. And what that means is remittance companies would then not have to set aside working capital that's stuck in Nostros and Vostros earning nil. They could be very, very capital efficient with very minimal price risk. Remittance companies also use stable coins, right, like USDC and USDT. I would point out that that use case actually arose because of a lot of development on the regulatory front. In the US, the Office of Currency Controller, which is the regulator for federally chartered banks, recognized that the use of stable coins, basically trust stable coins like USDC, are equivalent to using an ACH, right? So that actually drove up a lot of adoption of stable coins. Now, probably as a key market for remittances, we would be seeing a lot more of our own OFW inflows to come by way of crypto in the future. Skipping ahead to the tokenization of traditional assets, there was a time, maybe in mid 2017 to early 2018, where everyone was talking about ICOs. We're issuing this token, which entitles you to economic benefits, blah, blah, blah. But it is not a security. Long story short, probably technically speaking, these are securities. Crypto and blockchain technology just afforded a lot more people the opportunity to sell representations of economic return or securities. But what it did do is it allowed market participants to consider the technology in apply that technology to traditional assets. So today you actually have bonds, stocks, real estate, and currencies being exchanged in token form. What are the advantages there? Well, in the case of stocks and bonds, or in the case of the securities market, you won't need to have a registry or custodians or brokers to, registry or custodians to maintain ledgers or to maintain ownership records, and you also won't need exchange members, brokers, or other intermediaries to access the market. Now, obviously, it's not a altogether dominant approach to market functioning, right? There are trade-offs there, but arguably it does expand it does expand access to the market. One initiative that I probably would wish to talk about, because it affects us here in the Philippines, is the tokenization of government securities that are happening through bonds.ph, which, for full transparency, is a subsidiary of PDAX. There are now 7 issuances of government securities that are lodged on the Ethereum public network. And they're what you might call tokenized bonds, which allow the treasury to sell bonds at much lower clips than at present, maybe $1,000 or $100 in the case of the RTB. So now there are also initiatives, initiatives, mainly around real estate, land titles being probably a very popular potential use case. A lot of land titles, for example, in the Philippines are subject to dispute. It's not any different in other markets. There are also markets where ownership of real estate mean many things, right? It could mean the right to use, the right to transfer, the right to sell, the right to profit from, and all of those rights could be replicated in a smart contract, whereby a person can effectively lodge certain rights to another, let's say in exchange for rental income in the form of tokens. So basically, what I'm saying is you can automate a lot of what's happening in the real estate market if we were using real estate tokens or tokens to represent real estate ownership. I'll skip ahead to probably some of the more relevant topics today. NFTs. So a lot of you might have already seen NFTs. Friends might have been telling you that they were, staying up all night, minting and flipping and earning tens of thousands of pesos in one go. Or in the case of others who have Bored Apes, you might have made about $200,000-$300,000 last year per Bored Ape. Now, maybe just for starters, what are NFTs? Okay, non-fungible tokens are tokens that are unique and likely limited in supply, right? NFTs are in contrast to fungible tokens like Bitcoin, where every single piece of Bitcoin or every 0.1 BTC is the same as the other, right? Everything is the same. NFTs are tokens that have unique features, right? And the interesting thing about NFTs is that not only does it allow you to trace the ownership of a unique asset throughout its entire history, but you can also build a lot of features into NFTs to simulate economic activity. Okay, I'll get to those later. But for now, I'll just talk about some of the NFTs here today. Okay, the most popular probably is the Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? So this is an example of a Bored Ape. If I'm not mistaken, this costs about $300,000. This particular ape. Right now, I think the highest priced Bored Ape is at about $600,000. Now, it used to be more expensive when the markets were frothy early this year. But certainly all the valuations or all the prices in the crypto space have come down a lot since then. Anyway, so what's a Bored Ape? Well, it's just an image of an ape, right? Is it nice? Kind of, right? But it's not, I guess, $600,000 nice, right? So you might wonder what's happening here. Well, obviously, markets, as much as we would like to think that markets are rational, markets are largely irrational. Market participants might not always be able to value assets in the way that we could value equities or bonds or traditional assets, but everyone is able to post a price, and the market price is exactly what someone is willing to pay for an asset and what someone is willing to sell at, right? So using that just very market purist approach, you might now begin to appreciate that with a lot of a lot of liquidity in the market or a lot of cash, excess cash in the market, one might be spending hundreds of $1,000s on what is essentially an image. But just like in cryptocurrencies, all the hype and the influx of cash or capital into the space, uh, development in NFT technology are also building infrastructure for other use cases of NFTs. Potentially, you can create music NFTs where instead of a business model where an artist sells to Spotify and Spotify sells to listeners, taking a massive cut of the economics, you could have a music token that, when played, pays a very small amount to the artist at no cost to either the artist or the listener. You can basically create a blockchain-based Spotify that could probably disrupt Spotify and other similar centralized models, like Netflix is another example. Okay. You can also create NFT-based IDs, right? And with these NFTs, you can build in certain unalienable features like age, date of birth, citizenship, whether you are old enough to drive, whether you are old enough to vote, whether you are deceased or you're not, and all of that could actually be used as a source of truth on which other services can be built on, right? So, for example, a driver's licensing system can be based on a blockchain-based identity system, such that, hey, if this person is over 18, then they're eligible, right? And nobody ever has to have to fill out numerous forms at numerous venues of ID issuers, right? We wouldn't have to be carrying 8 or 9 IDs just to obtain services, right? And you could also see a lot of efficiencies there, where, for example, if you have voting or a voting system that's tied to a blockchain-based national ID system, we could probably eliminate electoral fraud altogether, right? Where everyone indeed has one vote, and if for example, a particular person is tagged on chain as deceased, he or she should not be able to vote. So maybe we would see a lot of these applications in the future, but right now, given all the hype surrounding NFTs, we are seeing influx of capital that are driving what I would say is essential infrastructure development. Now, just gonna touch a bit on crypto assets as an investment, because we're all CFA charter holders. Historically speaking, and when I say historically, I only mean the past 10 years, right? And because it's only the past 10 years, we're really just talking about Bitcoin here. Historically speaking, there have been very low correlations between Bitcoin and other asset classes, which if you include that, for example, in a diversified portfolio, you should see very favorable risk-adjusted returns. Actually, and if you also Google CFA, crypto, investment asset class, etc., you will come across numerous studies by the Institute precisely measuring the impact of BTC or other cryptocurrencies in a diversified portfolio. What I would point out, however, are two things. First is that this even though crypto remains a highly volatile asset, its volatility has actually decreased over time with size. So that might be indicative of the fact that as the crypto market matures, we're achieving we're achieving greater price discovery, right? As more participants enter the market and are beginning to express demand for the first time. Well, what we're seeing probably is crypto assets moving towards an actual market price. Now, the second thing I would point out is that while we're seeing, or while we have historically seen low correlations, maybe this year that is not so much the case, right? And while in the past maybe people would say that, hey, I'm buying Bitcoin because I'm a little bit unsure about the equities market, well, today everything has practically tanked. And probably we could attribute that to changes in the supply side of capital in the capital markets, when money is more expensive and is increasingly becoming more expensive, then asset valuations, regardless of what asset class, will probably have to adjust to reflect that. Last piece, probably before we maybe move on to some Q&A. A lot of the developments in the crypto space have been enabled by developments in the regulatory framework. I think we can all be, somewhat proud that the Philippines is one of the earliest regulators in the world to establish clear rules and guidelines for the use of cryptocurrencies. Back in 2017, the BSP has allowed the use of crypto in remittances, right? In fact, the first virtual currency exchange rules emanated from remittance and transfer company rules. But fast forward, the BSP has also had to change its nomenclature from virtual currencies to virtual assets, right? Recognizing that crypto may be used in other ways than just a means of payment. And early in 2021, the BSP also started to regulate virtual asset service providers that provide safekeeping, right? Which in the virtual asset parlance is equivalent to custody. The SEC, for its part, has also drafted rules around digital asset offerings, right? If you read them, you would find that those drafts closely resemble the process for a public issuance, and probably that's quite appropriate. Issuers will have to disclose material facts. Distributors or sellers of digital assets or instruments that behave like securities will need to come under the SRC's framework for salesmen or brokers. So all of these developments, though they're still in draft state, will likely see them implemented maybe in a year or a couple of years' time. And that's because the way that cryptocurrency adoption has grown globally, it's become more imperative for jurisdictions outside the Philippines to also develop their own frameworks, and we probably will adopt what other countries put forth. Lastly, a bit about PDAX. Our role in the crypto market space really is that of an exchange. Our priority is to facilitate the buying and selling of cryptocurrencies in the most efficient way possible. And right now we have a web and mobile app, so everything is direct market access. And you will find that this is also the norm in most crypto markets around the world. So I'll stop here and open the room for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Nichelle. To our participants, please turn your attention to the screen for the QR code of our online evaluation, and Oh, sorry, there's no evaluation yet. But if you have any questions, this is the time to ask. And there are quite a few questions already in the chat box. So a few are from Mondan. I'll read out one of them. So the first one is, as an asset, the promise of Bitcoin or crypto was that it provides negative correlation against stocks or other assets. Are we still going to get this from our investments at the moment?
Well, certainly I represent just one opinion, but I do think so, right? If you examine the features of Bitcoin closely, you will find that in a stable market environment, it should mirror what gold is in the traditional markets. But I think that the current conditions, right, given current market conditions where capital is becoming more expensive, taking a lot of that liquidity out of the financial markets will really result in virtually every asset class declining in price, and probably we'll see that there will be correlation, right? I think if the driver of the movement in prices is the interest rate environment. That's just my opinion. My classmate on Zoom.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience?
I can probably address the questions as they come so chat.
Okay.
Tokenization of real estate contracts. Yes, there are firms, but unfortunately, I think adoption here is quite slow, right? Because there likely needs to be legislative changes to support this. I do know that there is a firm that's seeking to start tokenization of real estate or titles through by starting with condo corps, right? Because probably condo corps have more flexibility in how they record ownership, and then later on maybe we'll have the piece of legislation we need to move that forward. Regarding the correlation question, studies have been cited. Shouldn't correlation studies consider that prior years' story is not as useful? Isn't recent correlation more important than actually? I think so definitely studies done now in the crypto markets probably will always have the problem of it being too reflective of current market conditions. Crypto as a market was born right out of the crisis and has been in a QE environment since birth. So I do think that it's hard to probably design a perfect study in crypto at the moment. Thoughts on Ethereum? So I think Ethereum was the real game changer. Obviously, Bitcoin proved that blockchain technology works. What Ethereum is doing, in my opinion, is it's allowing us to leverage blockchain technology for other uses than just transferring Bitcoin. I would liken it to similar advancements in the internet, where whereas before it was really just between institutional users, the internet had a Netscape moment where even ordinary individuals could interact with the internet. So I see Ethereum in that light. Cryptocurrency like Bitcoin is same as cash. The changes like that of stocks. Actually, Bitcoin certainly is not a stable coin, right? It is not meant to be constant in its value over time. And sorry, the importance of mining. So remember I mentioned that the way blockchain technology facilitates the transfer and the recording and maintenance of data is through the use of this distributed network, right? Meaning anybody can plug his or her computer to support the functioning of the network. But obviously, as someone who's using or expending computing power, you would need to be compensated for that. And so the network is designed to reward you for it, and that's what we call mining. Next question. Where are we in terms of adoption for crypto and NFTs? How many? It's actually quite difficult to arrive at a very reliable number. That's because while we see the number of wallets on chain, it's hard to really identify where the holders of those wallets reside. We do know that there are about 4 million MetaMask wallets that likely were created in the Philippines because of the boom of Axie Infinity. Coins.ph, which is the first crypto player in the Philippines, publicized that they have about 16 million users. Maybe not all of them are in crypto. Perhaps safe to say that we're at between 5 to 10 million crypto holders in the Philippines. Is crypto mining viable today? Today, as of this date, likely not, particularly in countries that have a high cost of electricity, among which we are. It's just the market prices are just too low for it to be sustainable for us. Any thoughts on XRP's SEC case? I think so for context, the US SEC charged Ripple and Ripple executives for selling unregistered securities. So this is probably the most important landmark case in the crypto industry. I think what would happen here is that well, I don't know. I'll just make my prediction. The court will likely just instruct the SEC to provide greater clarity, and probably the SEC and Ripple will come to some sort of settlement. But I think that the precedent that will be set here is that while assets may, at the time of their issuance, be considered securities and need to be registered as such, they may or may not always remain securities in their use, right? So probably the analogy I'd make here is for collectible stock certificates or collectible bond certificates. Today, they're still being sold, but they're no longer being sold as securities, even though when they were first sold to the market, they were used to raise money. So anyway, that's one tiny Pinoy's opinion in a world of ambiguity. Is the Philippines lagging in crypto and blockchain adoption compared to other countries? I think adoption of crypto has become very different from country to country. Here in the Philippines, I would say we are the clear world leader, if not one of the world leaders in play to earn gaming adoption. But we are not the and that's probably because there was an arbitrage against our labor markets, right? Where minimum wage where minimum wage levels were less than what someone might earn playing a game globally, right? So there was that arbitrage between the crypto markets globally and the labor markets locally, leading to massive adoption for Axie Infinity. So we are probably one of the world leaders in that segment of crypto-based gaming. But we're definitely lagging behind in other areas, right? Because we still do not have, I guess, a lot of capital in the crypto space. We don't have institutional investors here in the Philippines involved in crypto. Which is kind of not the case in the US, right? Where a lot of hedge funds, family offices, and even large university endowments like Yale, Harvard, and UPenn, etc., have allocations towards crypto. So we are lagging behind in that regard. Any thoughts on the switch of Ethereum from, I guess, proof of work to proof of stake? Yeah, so I think proof of stake is probably more sustainable in the long run. It's more obviously environmentally friendly, but it has its drawbacks, right? One of the nice features of Bitcoin's proof of work consensus mechanism is that you could really argue that it's decentralized. But with proof of stake, right, like holding more of the governance assets affords you more, I guess, more decision-making power over their network. Probably takes a little bit away from that decentralization benefit. Now, this is just I'm rambling a little bit now, but suffice it to say that with crypto and the different networks, there are always trade-offs. And I just see this as the Ethereum community making one very real and I think positive trade-off for the network.
Any more questions from the audience? Okay, we'll give it one more minute just in case anyone has any follow-up questions or changes their minds. Okay. Again, thank you, Mr. Nichelle Gaba, for your participation in this talk and for, of course, enlightening all of us with regards to the crypto and NFT space. To our participants, please turn your attention to the screen for the QR code of our online evaluation. Please take time to answer the survey as this will help us evaluate your feedback and take note of it for the next talks that we'll have for our investor series. It'll just take you about 1 to 2 minutes to complete. Last but not the least, let's turn on also our videos for the photo opportunity with our guest speaker for today. Okay. Can someone give us a cue if the photo has been taken already or if it's about to be taken, please?
Okay, 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you everyone for joining our info session. Again, CFA Society Philippines would like to thank again our sponsors. So for our platinum sponsor, that would be Sea Oil Philippines Incorporated. For our silver sponsors, BDO Capital, Coco Life Asset Management Company Incorporated, and FTI Consulting Philippines Incorporated. And then for our bronze sponsors, AP Securities Incorporated, DBP Daiwa Capital Markets Philippines Incorporated, and Papa Securities Corporation. Event partners are FMAP, Mart, and Share Philippines. This concludes our webinar, and thanks once again, everyone. Goodbye.